Okay, it is 4:59 on April 29th. And so we are going to open the meeting of the Gig Harbor Planning Commission. We shall start with a roll call. John Krasick.
Here.
Shannon Greina. That was a here. Bob Soltis. He's here. Tom Brown.
Here.
Larry Bradbury.
Here.
And Amanda Bennett.
Here.
And I'm Greg Hooksma. We also have from the city staff, Carl DeSimas, Kimberly Mahoney, and Michelle Thomas. And that's all everybody I see.
Correct.
Okay. So looking at the agenda, why don't we start with a review of the meetings from our last, the minutes from our last meeting. Any comments or anyone that care to submit a motion?
I move we
I'll go
accept
for-
the minutes.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed, say nay. The motion passes unanimously. Okay, so I will turn it over to you, Carl, for hopefully our final discussion amongst the Planning Commission regarding the proposed amendment.
That's great. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the final discussion here prior to the public hearing and deliberations therein. And at the start here, I'll just say I didn't consider this previously, but my staff report and the exhibits, that all went out today. You should have all received a link today to the staff report and exhibits for the hearing next week. So what I didn't think about was when we have this extra meeting, if there are any sort of changes or recommendations for changes that come out of this meeting, those would have to be sort of carried over into the deliberation next week and then made a part of your recommendation up to City Council. So it's a little awkward, I guess, but I think it works fine. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there at the beginning of this, so everybody's got we're all have the same understanding of where we're at in the process. And then at the end of the meeting, we can talk a little bit more about process too, if anybody cares to. Tonight, then, we had a couple of items that were left over from last week. One of those was some changes to the definition of public art. There was some desire on the commission's part to make a couple of edits to the definition. And the chair had provided a definition that he had found that contained some of those elements within it, and we tried to incorporate those into the definition that we had been presenting to you, while at the same time trying to kind of keep with the spirit. I'm getting an echo there from somebody. Sorry.
If everyone can mute, please.
Thanks, Chair. And while trying to keep the spirit of what we had been presenting to you previously, and kind of keeping it at least the intent of it compatible and consistent with what we had put out to the public and what we've been working on with the Department of Ecology as well. So hopefully we've nailed it for y'all, and you'll like what we've done. And then the second thing that had come up last week that we talked about, and this had been brought to mine and Kim's attention just before the meeting, so we hadn't had time to really think about it too much, but that was the idea of incorporating the public right-of-way as another location where public art could be allowed. And so I was a little uncertain how that would look, or what that would mean and what that would entail, and trying to weave that into these amendments that we've been looking at. But I think we might have struck a balance, and I had a conversation with Greddy and Associates, our third-party biologist and consultant that helps us out with these sorts of things, and they seem to think that there was no problem with incorporating it in a certain manner, not calling it out separately as much as just kind of incorporating it as part and parcel of publicly owned lots where we're already talking about allowing the public art. So that's what we tried to do, and I'll walk through all the places where we wove that into the amendments in just a minute here. And then finally, we got some feedback from the Department of Ecology. Our liaison at the Department of Ecology is a woman named Kim Van Zwallenberg, and she's really great. I've been working with her for a long time. She's been real distracted by another shoreline master program update, and that's of the city of Tacoma's. And so she hasn't had a lot of time to look at what we've been working on, but she did finally last week, or maybe earlier this week. And she gave Kim and I a little bit of feedback. Most of what she gave us, we had already covered through our discussions. So thank you, commissioners, for the process that we've gone through so far and catching some of the things that we've caught. And then, we bounced off of her a couple of the other ideas, like adding public right-of-way in, and some of the other changes that we've made, and she liked most everything. Just, at least at that cursory glance that she gave it. So there was one item that she had brought up that I brought to you, that I wanted to bring to your attention tonight, and that is in our proposed 7.22.1, the policies section of that new chapter that we're proposing for the Shoreline Master Program, and that would be in the policy for location. And so we can jump into that kind of at the end. So firstly, Chair, if it's okay, I was thinking maybe we sort of parse this out and take a look at public art first. Then maybe I could walk through the staff recommendations for where public art would weave into this, and then finally take a look at that policy. Does that sound like a good way to go for this study session?
Yeah, I think I like that approach. And before we go into that any further, I just would like to make kind of a general statement. And one of the things that we need to remember this evening and all the time we're meeting about this is that we are discussing and working on purely a policy decision regarding a change to the Shoreline Master Program. So an amendment. And this, as we all know, is brought to our attention by a specific project. But we need to keep in mind that we need to divorce ourselves of those two things. So in the iteration of what's happening tonight and what's been going on the past couple of weeks is that a discussion about a policy that we're going to forward to the city council with our recommendation via the staff, the city planners. And I think all of us have been perhaps, at least in my mind, my own mind, we have this other thing overlaying our discussions, or at least how we're thinking about this. And we really need to not do that. They're two completely separate issues. Eventually, any project may come in the future back to us for discussion about a specific project. But right now, we're just specifically discussing a policy. And so we need to limit our discussion to that, limit our thoughts to that, and finish plowing through that with that mindset. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Chair. And so if I could, so public art, we'll tackle public art first. And I've got the definition up on my screen here. I could share with, Michelle, could you make me, provide me with the magic ability of screen sharing? Thank you. Where's my, here we go. Okay, so there we go. So this is what we came up with. I know there was some direction from the commission to take a look at the public art definition, and specifically, you know, in our notes anyway, and from what we heard a couple weeks ago, it seemed like having something in the definition about a public process was important to the commissioners. And then I think also this idea, and if I remember correctly, the general public rather than community was another item that was brought up, or at least if it wasn't brought up, then it was in the definition that the chair had provided and seemed to make more sense than community. So we added in that there would be, you know, some public process that of course is covered again later in this proposed amendment. We added in the right of way. We added in publicly owned lots and in public right of way rather than spaces to make it just a little bit more specific. And we added in the general public instead of community when we're talking about who would be enjoying and receiving the education from said public art. So I guess I'll leave it there for a second, Chair. If anybody wants to discuss or has any thoughts or comments on that, I'm happy to answer any questions I can.
Sure.
Well, I do have a concern about the term public process, because I think it is sufficiently vague that it could invite future problems. What do we think we mean by public process?
Well, when we were thinking about public process, and Kim, I'll start, and if you want to jump in, if you've got any other thoughts on it. But when we were thinking about this, we were really kind of focused on the idea that any public art would first have to go through the Arts Commission if it's going to be in a publicly owned lot or in public right of way. So they would be sort of the gatekeeper. And then after that, there's a permitting process potential, depending on where that thing's going to be located. If it's going to be in the shoreline jurisdiction, then likely there will be a permitting process relative to placing that art within the shoreline jurisdiction. Shoreline substantial development permit, variance, conditional use, just depending on where it's located and what the circumstances are around that location.
My concern is that I don't believe that public process is a term of art, and therefore it isn't well understood or well defined in any context, like a legal context. And it seems to me that after some public art is erected, if I didn't like it or someone didn't like it, they could complain, sue the city, whatever, on the grounds that they were not included in the process that approved that particular piece of art. And public process kind of implies that there's a means for the general public to participate in decisions about a piece of art. And I don't think that's something we want. We don't want to propose that be the case, because I mean, I for one am perfectly comfortable with the Arts Commission and the City Council and the Planning Department and the Planning Commission to do the right job of managing the creation of public art for Gig Harbor. But I think this kind of implies that everybody gets a vote, and I don't think that's what we want to imply. And I have a hard time seeing the value of adding this because it is such a vague term. So that's my concern about it.
Would changing the word created to approved through a public process make a difference?
I'm not sure that I think it would, because if the issue is a piece of art that someone finds offensive, for example, then by saying that we have a public process, we kind of open the door to them saying, no, you didn't. I didn't get to vote on that thing. I find it offensive, and I'm going to sue the city to remove it. You see what I'm saying?
Well, the public processes for approval, though, are well defined. And if a person is either unaware or chooses not to participate in those processes, those would never be held to account for the city.
Well, how would an individual participate in the decision on a particular piece of public art?
It has to go through the Arts Commission
Yeah,
or the parks or wherever they want to put it.
right.
And Carl, would these meetings then be, these meetings are open to the public and they would be noticed, correct?
That's a great question, Commissioner, and I was kind of waiting my turn to jump in. But I'm not that familiar with the Art Commission, to be honest. I've not sat in on their meetings. I've not really been a part of their processes. My understanding is that they would be a public meeting, and I would assume that they are open to taking public comment if they have something before them. And if that is the case, then that is public process. And at that point, the Arts Commission would be the sort of recommending body at that point to recommend that a piece of art is placed within a publicly owned location or public right-of-way. It would then be something that council would likely make a decision on to move forward with or not. And then it would go through the permitting process on the community development side. So, and that's a very public process. So all three of those things that I've mentioned are public processes, and Commissioner Brown's points are certainly well taken, that the way it has been posed here is a bit vague, but at the same time, I think we wanted it to be a little bit vague to allow for some flexibility. There's some acknowledgement that public art has to have gone through a public process, but we're not necessarily defining what that process is. That process could be defined at the, more at the administrative level.
Well, my perspective is that that to address a couple of points you made, Tom, that it's not a matter of everyone getting a vote. For me, it's a matter of everyone having a voice. And so if I look at the other side of the coin, I do not want there to be the ability of the group of people that are on the Arts Commission in a room unto themselves to decide that a certain piece of artwork is appropriate to be placed permanently in a public space in Gig Harbor. And I think it's critical that there is specific language that allows or compels a public process before that piece of artwork is approved. And I can tell you that I have been active in the city for many years. I'm on the list, the notification list about stuff. And despite that, the artwork at Ansich Park went in. I never knew about it, never heard of it, never had an opportunity to say, hey, I think that's a really cool design or not. And I can, tick right down the list of 10 different pieces of art that are in our city, just in the time that I have lived here. And I can say the same thing about all of those. So I'm not trying to make this sound like that from a personal perspective that I disapprove of any one of them, but I don't think it's appropriate for the Arts Commission in a closed room to be able to do this without specifying that there needs to be a public process that happens when it's being placed on publicly owned lots and public right-of-ways.
And Chair, I was just looking up the Arts Commission. So I went to our website and then that took me to a link to the city code. And within the city code, so this is chapter 2.49 of the Arts Commission. And in 2.49020 rules of procedure, it does state that the rules of the commission shall provide that all commission meetings are open to the public and that notice of meetings shall comply with the Washington OPMA to the extent proceedings of the commission are governed by such act. The procedure shall address receipt and processing of citizen proposals and requests.
Yeah, Carl, and I think that that very well describes what a public process is, that you've got public notice, you've got open meetings, and you've got the ability for the public to make input. To me, that is what public process is all about.
And if it's also, I was going to say also, if the art goes from the Arts Commission onto the City Council, there's another layer there too. And all of the council meetings are public, and I presume that they, before making a final determination of whether to approve it or not, that there would be some public comment within their meetings as well. So it seems like you've got at least those two opportunities for the public to have a voice or make a comment onto a piece of art prior to it getting installed. If it's both of those, if it goes from the Arts Commission through the City Council as well, that there's at least two opportunities. My next question also would be, is there one of those land use signs that would go up where a piece of art would be going up? Where right now we see the orange signs around town when someone's doing some new development of some sort. Would the art have something like that as well?
There would be if the art requires a shoreline substantial development permit, okay. then one of those would go up. Actually, any of the shoreline permits would warrant a posting for the notice of application, and then for any subsequent meetings or hearings would also be posted or noticed at the site. Kim, correct me if I am wrong. I think I must be right.
Yeah, sorry, it was in full screen mode. I couldn't find my mute button. Anyway,
oh, okay.
Not important because you are right.
Thank you.
I was just going to add that I think that for me, a lot of times we are talking about marrying up the language in various, to make sure that our policies and procedures and comprehensive plan and so on, and the language that we have matches other organizations. And for me, this is just a simple 2 words that does that, as has been delineated by the other folks, that describing the public process that happens. And so I don't see it as a risk to invite litigation here.
Commissioner Soltis, you're muted. It looks like you're talking, but you're muted. I'm sorry.
Can you take us back to take us off screen share? Thanks.
I'm sorry. As I look at those words again on the very first line there, I think someone mentioned that creative could be replaced with approved, because if we're talking about the public process, I don't think that's the process where you create the art. I think you create the art, the artists create the art, and then we're talking about is somebody going through the wickets, which is basically the public process. So as I looked at that, I thought approved might really be better, but I also would say that I think we've got the public process covered in the council and the commission, and I think we'd be fine with it as is.
I too agree with Larry's recommendation to change the wording to approval as opposed to creation.
I do as well.
I have no problem with that.
I agree as well.
And I agree with the chair that the reference to a public process does not propose a significant litigation risk.
Okay, so it seems like we have a consensus to change the wording there and then accept it as written otherwise.
I've made a note of that, Chair, about changing created to approved. And so this would be something, again, as I said at the beginning, that would have to be brought up in the deliberation and made a part of the Planning Commission's recommendation when that motion is made. So sort of an amendment to the staff recommendation that's been put out there to change created to approved. So during deliberations, that will need to be raised. And I've got a note of it too, so if I can help remind at that point if need be.
So would it be easier just to make the motion right now?
No, we need to make the motion at that point because we've already noticed the public hearing. So those documents are out for public review. And so we can't really make changes to them we can't really make formal changes to them at this point. That has to be formally changed during the public hearing.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Okay, so I guess, so that sounds good. So I think it sounds like we're good. And of course, along those same lines, when we get in, when you're in deliberations, if there are other things that, that you want to incorporate into that, into that recommendation, at that point, motions can be made to make those changes as part of that recommendation that goes up to council, with keeping in mind that there will be a stop at the Department of Ecology first for their initial consistency review. And if they propose amendments or changes, to what comes out of the planning commission's deliberations, then that could juggle the process just a little bit. You know, it could end up coming back to planning commission. It could end up going to council first, and council making a determination in whether or not they want to accept those amendments or go forward with the planning commission recommendation or remand it back to planning commission for further study. So it can go in all kinds of ways at that point. But you know, I just want to keep that out there that you know, what we're looking at now doesn't necessarily have to be the end all be all. Okay, and so the next point I wanted to discuss tonight with you guys is looking at where we incorporated the public right-of-way into the amendments. And I'll go back to sharing my screen again here. So I've gone through and highlighted this staff recommended amendments was provided to you for tonight. So you do have this, but it didn't have the public right-of-way highlighted in that recommendation. I apologize for that. So I went through before the meeting and highlighted those points, those places where we threw public right-of-way into the mix. Obviously, we were just looking at this in the public art definition, and then we added it to the footnote in the permitted use table to be public art is permitted only on city-owned lots or the public right-of-way. You'll note maybe that we changed this wording from permissible to permitted. That was a recommendation by the Department of Ecology, and I think it's a good. I think it's better language. And then in 7.22. The new chapter, we added in public right-of-way into the goal statement. And I think that is the last spot where it shows up. So if anybody wants to discuss any of those sections or anything else, I'll turn it back over to you, Chair.
Okay, open the floor for discussion.
Hey, Carl, I'm a little confused about the public right of way. Can you give me an example or two of what that might mean in terms of placing a piece of art in the public right of way?
It's a great question, Commissioner Soltis. And so this was a tough one for us too. Kim and I had some really good discussions about this. There are several locations within the city that are currently public right-of-way. We have so three really good examples. The old ferry landing is public right-of-way. Let me go off of screen sharing. So we're the old ferry landing is public right-of-way. The maritime pier is actually public right-of-way. So that entire parking lot at the tides is actually public right-of-way. It's not a parcel or a lot. And the Bogue viewing platform are three really good examples of places where we're utilizing public right-of-way currently as sort of public space and, you know, or park property. And then we have several locations where we have street ends. So Kim, help me out with the street names. All of a sudden I'm blanking out. Novak.
Yeah, the end of Novak, and then
Shoot. Yeah, I've lost it too. I'm sorry.
I know I'm driving at Milton.
Goodman coming off of North Harborview Drive. It's not actually Goodman. Goodman ends at North Harborview Drive, but as it crosses Harborview Drive, there's actually public right-of-way that goes down to the water. And so those are just a couple of examples. We've got about, I think there's 4 or 5 throughout the harbor where the right-of-way just ends at the shoreline, and those are known as street ends. And the Shoreline Master Program actually calls them out in a few places. And in my staff report, I highlighted some of that language as justification for including public right-of-way within this within these regulations, because the Shoreline Master Program actually supports public use of those street ends for public enjoyment, passive recreation. And so it kind of fits in with what we're trying to do here. Where we were kind of hung up a little bit is on this idea of whether or not the regulations for requiring a vegetation conservation strip apply within the public right-of-way. That was the thing that kind of gave Kim and I quite a bit of pause, but we ferreted it out a little bit and found that it does in those instances. And so this including public right-of-way into these regulations really kind of fits in seamlessly, really.
Thanks, Carl.
I would add, I believe, Carl, that at least one of those properties, the boat viewing platform, has one, if not two, pieces of art.
Yeah, that's true, Chair. It's a good point. I mean, we've got some public art that has been placed out there already in some cases, and you know how those were placed and how they were permitted at the time. You know, I can't really speak to, and I don't exactly know how the boat. I believe that the boat viewing platform went through a fairly rigorous public process. But as far as, and I know the Maritime Pier did, but as far as the old ferry landing, and maybe some of the art that's been placed at Donkey Creek, and possibly at some of the other parks, Scansey and such, I can't speak to all of those, and I know in some cases maybe there's just been some rogue placement of art in some cases, but we're trying to do a better job of that and be better stewards going forward, I think. So, this was the project that spurred this amendment, really made us think twice about how we're thinking about public art along the shoreline. So.
Well, I think based on the explanation you provided, Carl, it makes perfect sense to include public right-of-way in it, so I'm supportive of this change.
I see some other nods of heads. I agree.
I concur as well.
I do too.
I agree as well.
Me 4.
Okay. Well, barring further input or comment, then that sounds like we have consensus there as well.
Okay, great. And so the final piece, the final changes that I wanted to bring to your attention this evening. Let me go back to share screen here. Is something that was brought to our attention by the Department of Ecology, as I said at the beginning. And the main piece of this really is the change from give preference to encourage the placement of. And the rationale behind Ecology's comment on removing give preference is that preference has other meaning when talking about shoreline management. And I don't have a lot of background on that per se, but if it gives Ecology pause, then it makes me think that it's a, that it's a big deal. So, I didn't question the comment. I just felt that it was worth bringing back to the Planning Commission and having a discussion about it. Now, speaking about preference, where I would think that it would come into play is generally when talking about location, siting location. So when we're talking about no net loss, or if we're talking about mitigation, sometimes we get into discussing preference. But I see, in my opinion, looking at this, encourage is probably better policy language, and this is a policy as opposed to a regulation, whereas give preference to me would lend itself better probably to regulatory language. She also asked us to consider including this language regarding in combination with public access viewpoints instead of located on or near the shoreline. Kim and I had a discussion about this, and we're not entirely sold on the idea of including that language. Because we don't necessarily want to tie, even though one of the tenets of public art in the shoreline, as is being described in this amendment and in these regulations and policies, is that we do want to get people to the shoreline. It's another draw for folks to come down and enjoy the shore. It allows for some passive recreation, as long as it can be done in a manner that is not detrimental to the environment or the ecology of the place. And so and so of course public access and viewpoints comes along with that, but we don't necessarily want to tie the public art specifically to public access and viewpoints. The way this reads to me, it does sort of tie it together. And so I'd be interested to hear the Planning Commission's thoughts on that. And then we added in the language, facilitate and enhance the public's ability to reach and enjoy the water's edge, which I think is just some additional language to sort of fluff it up a little bit, but also to say that the idea behind placing public art near the water's edge should be thought of as an improvement to that area, and not just that we're facilitating putting public art there for the pure purpose of just putting public art there. Hopefully that makes sense. And Cheryl, oh, sorry, Kim, if you want to add something.
Yeah, can I add one thought, Carl?
Yes, please.
Just in the conversation as it relates to public access, this, like Carl said, was language that was introduced by the Department of Ecology, and it was one that I was hesitant to include in our language, only because we have a specific chapter in our SMP that regulates public access. And when public access is required, it's required in a very specific manner. It has to be designed and located in a very specific way. And the deviation of that is a deviation from a regulated performance standard, which necessitates a shoreline variance process. So it kind of, in my mind, it had the potential, this language has the potential of informing planners that public access as regulated strictly against the performance criteria in chapter 6.5 of the SMP is what we're talking about here, which I don't believe is the case. I echo Carl's comments that it's a foundational principle of this of public art installation that it encourages public access and invites more of the public, but do we really want to create a situation where we are adding language that seems to suggest that an applicant who wants to install a piece of art also needs to install public access specifically against the design requirements in 6.5. And that just didn't seem to be our impression of what we're trying to do. And so I have my reservation about this language for that reason.
Thanks, Kim. And I should say that we did not, this language is not currently included in the staff recommendation that was put out to the public today for the public hearing next week. And I held it back for the reason that I didn't feel it would have been proper to put this out without having planning commission input first. Whereas some of the other changes that were made, we've had an opportunity to at least discuss. I know that the public right of way we haven't discussed quite as much, but I didn't feel like that was as big a stretch maybe as this language. This language kind of changes the character of this passage, I feel, and it sort of sets the tone a little bit for the policies that we're trying to put in place and the regulations. And so I think Kim put it very well, what staff's reservations are about some of this language. So with that, I will stop rambling and let you all discuss.
Okay. If you could take it off a screen share again, please. And I'll once again open the floor for discussion.
I agree with Carl. I think I can visualize some kinds of art that are actually better viewed at a distance than up close by a public viewpoint. So I'd be inclined to strike that clause.
The question I have is, what is a public access viewpoint versus what is not when it comes to shorelines?
Kim, I feel like I'd be overstepping if I jumped in on that question. I'm happy to give it a stab, but you'd probably be better than I.
Yeah, sure. So public, it's a I don't know that it necessarily comes with its own definition, but it is a defined type of public access that's required via 6.5. And so I think it's typically applied and interpreted to represent an area for that is accessible to the public to be able to have a view opportunity of what we sometimes refer to as the view basin or Gig Harbor Bay.
So some of our parks that we have that have access to the shoreline are not necessarily considered public access viewpoints just because you can access the shoreline from there. And they might have a view, but those would not be, some of those areas don't specifically meet that criteria to be considered a public access viewpoint. I'm just trying to understand where that terminology would apply or wouldn't apply for certain places.
You're right to ask. It's a good question.
In my mind, the manual, the Shoreline Master Program is set up to nurture and provide for public access. I mean, it really, a lot of what the Shoreline Master Program talks about is getting folks to the shore and allowing the public as much access as we possibly can. As part of that, it also wants to create views for those folks when they're accessing. And so it's kind of one in the, it's sort of one in the same in that language. And I'll just read from 6.5 public access. This is 6.5 I, which is views and visual access. And it says, preserve views and vistas to and from the water to enjoy the aesthetic qualities and character of Gig Harbor shorelines. Expand opportunities for visual public access to shorelines commensurate with obligations for urban infilling under the Growth Management Act and the rights of property owners. So that's policy language, but the policy language is essentially saying, in essence, what this is trying to, the intent of this amended language is trying to get to, I think.
Can I take a stab at providing a better response to Commissioner Bennett?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. In the term public access viewpoint, I don't think is a term that we have in our SMP. Excuse me. We've got viewpoints and we've got public access. I kind of don't look at viewpoints and more consider the suggested language of public access and including that, because that is something that we regulate in our SMP. The term public access is a regulated requirement in our SMP. And it by itself has a number of different ways that you can design for public access, but they are specific and they are required in certain circumstances. And so it was my fear that by including this language that it might inform some planners that a type of public access via 6.5 in the SMP would need to be inherently incorporated into any public art installation proposal. And then they would then go and look at those regulated different ways to design and incorporate public access into the project. And if they weren't able to meet those, then the relief is through a shoreline variance. And that just becomes this enormous regulatory process for something that I don't think that that's the intent of what our liaison at the Department of Ecology was intending by incorporating this language. But I think that potential definitely exists because we do try to be very careful and thorough stewards of the shoreline and the environment. And I would worry about the unintended consequences of incorporating that language.
That helps a ton. Thank you very much.
Sure, sure.
I don't really see the point of adding language that could be confusing downstream when before we had it pretty straightforward. It's gonna be good for everybody by the shoreline. It's not really, if it confuses the professional planners, then my God, what about the rest of us that are going to be confused? So maybe less is more.
The entire clause to me seems a little extraneous.
Tom, what are your thoughts on this one? Or John?
Yeah, I'm in favor of striking that clause. I think these were good comments and I think it's superfluous.
How about you,
Go ahead.
Shannon?
Sorry, technical difficulty. I agree that that clause should come out. I agree that it almost reads like it's a requirement. And I really think that it's super important that we minimize the impact of any work that's done in this area. And by adding that as a criteria, I think that we're just opening the door to more impact than may be necessary. And I'm uncomfortable with that.
Tom, did you have any thoughts you'd like to share?
I agree with the comments that Commissioner Greina just stated.
Yeah, I do as well. I think all the comments that have been made are cogent, and I think you really nailed, Shannon, the way that I was feeling about it. So I think everybody has commented. Larry, did you? I don't want to exclude anyone.
Yes, I had made the comment that I felt the clause in its entirety was extraneous.
That's right. That's right. Thank you. Okay. So then Carl, can you slap up the quickly what the original one was before that change from ecology? If you, I have it here that I could read it, but it's probably easier if you can pull it up quickly.
It's here. So these are the line outs are the original language, and the bold term verbiage is the new language that ecology recommended. And I would like to get everyone's thoughts on this idea of give preference to versus encourage the placement of, because I think in her comments to Kim and I, that was the one that really stood out to her as the problem. And I think the other two items that she put in were just sort of ideas that she was, you know, floating out there during her review. I didn't get the sense that ecology would be sticking to their guns on those, but they might on this give preference to versus encourage the placement of.
I just wanted to say I agree. I mean, I have a problem with give preference to, because it sounds like, you know, it's being jumped ahead, or it's being handled in a different way. I mean, the wording makes me uncomfortable.
I agree with Shannon. I feel like it gives some kind of favoritism feeling in some fashion. Also, that encourage the placement just kind of gives you a little bit more push as to where to do it.
Same here. I think Shannon's comments are well stated.
Concur.
Yes, I agree as well.
Okay, so this would be another of those items then that we would want to pick up during deliberations and be made, if commission chooses, be made a part of the planning commission's recommendation to go forward during that public hearing and thereby then would go into your recommendation and then on to ecology.
Is it okay if I read what I feel like I heard the commission say would be the preferred language?
Yes,
Carl?
please do.
Okay. Encourage the placement of public art located on or near the shoreline to facilitate and enhance the public's ability to reach and enjoy the water's edge and to view the water and the shoreline. No changes to the second sentence. Is that right? Did I capture that?
Correct.
Okay.
Those were all the items that I had, Chair, unless there was anything else that anybody wanted to discuss within the staff recommended documents or anything else for that matter. Happy to answer any questions or anything we can do.
Yeah, Carl, just a process thing. Will we be meeting at 6 o'clock next week?
That's correct, Commissioner. Yeah, 6 o'clock for public hearings. And that allows the public a little more time to get home from work and get to the hearing. I guess it's different now that we're all in this virtual world, but that's the way the bylaws read. And thank you, Michelle, for picking up on that.
All righty. Well, once again, I think you guys did, great work. And I would iterate that we're looking at 5 or 6 simple little words, but that probably represents days of work by both you and Kim and Michelle, and coordinating with ecology and all those people and the consultants on behalf of the city's future is once again just grade A performance. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair. We appreciate that, and it's been great. The process has been really good, I feel like, so far in this public art amendment. And I would just say that I was just looking at the calendar. So May 6th will be the hearing on this item. I've been speaking with Gretty and Associates about the periodic, so the overall Shoreline Master Program periodic update that's been going on for a few years. As well as the FEMA floodplain and flood regulations updates that are sort of kind of tied together, unfortunately tied together. And I think that I'm hopeful that I will be able to bring back on May 20th to the Planning Commission a conversation starter again, but more detailed and sort of pinpointed in on those actual items that we need to finish up on. So again, sort of another overview of what we've already done, and then really just kind of drilling down on those items that still need some further consideration, and then hopefully hopefully starting to discuss the idea of having the public hearing on the periodic update thereafter, as soon as you're feeling comfortable with it.
Okay. Sounds good. So we'll look forward to the public hearing. I guess it might be the first for a couple people. So and I guess we've already gotten one submission from someone.
There were a few comments, yeah, in the exhibits. They're rolled, all the public comments are rolled up into one exhibit, which is how I usually do it for my exhibits. I know some other planners do it differently, but I don't like to make the exhibit list look too long, and it seems like it's just as easy to scroll through those comments. There's also some responses within those public comments from me. And we've gotten a couple comments from the tribes, Puyallup tribe and the Squaxin tribe, both commented on the amendments. So please do look through those prior to the hearing, and then we'll see how many folks turn up to actually give live testimony as well.
And what would be the deadline for them to submit written comments so that you guys have an opportunity to compile them?
Written comments will be, so the 30-day public comment period that was noticed by Ecology ends on
the day of the meeting at 5.
Thanks, Michelle. May 6th, that's right. And so not only do we have our own public comment period that's out there, that started basically today. We have that 30-day public comment period that's been ongoing for a while. We also issued SEPA determination of non-significance on this amendment. And so most of the comments that we've received actually came in after we after we issued that determination of non-significance. So so we still could, yeah, we still could receive some more comments. And if I do receive comments, I will read those into the record at the public hearing as part of my presentation.
Okay. All right. Well, also like to thank all the commissioners for your great work that I think your thoughtful input has facilitated the work of Carl and Kimberly. And they have expressed their gratitude to me, and I think to you all in the past, but this is a great group to work with, and I think you should be proud of your contribution. So barring that, I am willing to entertain a motion from the floor to close the meeting.
I move we adjourn.
I second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? The motion passes unanimously, and the meeting of the Planning Commission of the City of Gig Harbor is adjourned at 6:05 p.m. Thanks so much, everybody.
Everybody have a
Thank
good
you.
week.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Have a good week.
Thanks.
Bye now.
Have a great weekend.